What's up, YouTube Revolution? ZombfectedGaming 349 at your fingertips. Welcome to the 20th anniversary of the Mercenaries Franchise documentary, featuring a guest known on YouTube as TheProfessional. And we will be making this documentary possible with Skype, something that is very old-fashioned. And since that Mercenaries is a very old-fashioned video game franchise that started all the way back on January 11th of 2005, we will be making this feel like we are taking a trip back to the early 2000s. So anyways, everyone, why don't we start the show?
Hello everyone, this is a documentary for the Mercenaries franchise. We're going to be going over Pandemic Studios, most of the Mercenaries games, and even some of the other games that were developed by Pandemic as well. So anyways, let's talk about Pandemic Studios. Pandemic Studios was founded in 1998 by a man named Andrew Goldman and Josh Resnick. What do you know about the Pandemic Studios, Pat?
I actually didn't know much about Pandemic Studios when they formed. I didn't find out about Pandemic Studios when I was a kid until it was about 2004. Because in 2004 they released Star Wars Battlefront, and that was my first Pandemic game that I played, was Star Wars Battlefront, the very original one.
With me and stuff, the first game I ever played from Pandemic was Mercenaries 2 World in Flames on the PlayStation 2. I never played the PlayStation 3 version at first, and then I eventually played the PlayStation 3 version later on. So that's how I have a history with Pandemic Studios. But let's also talk about how Pandemic, also, they weren't under the umbrella of EA at first. I do know that they were under LucasArts, of course, which is one of the reasons to why.
LucasArts with the that's how they got the rights to Star Wars Battlefront, I'm pretty sure.
And then eventually EA acquired Pandemic Studios. But more later on about what EA does to Pandemic later on. So yeah, Pandemic is well known for games such as the Mercenaries franchise, the Star Wars Battlefront, and even Destroy All Humans, and also the Saboteur. A lot of pretty cool games. I didn't play any of the Star Wars Battlefront games before, but I never even played Destroy All Humans either, but I should definitely check it out because it looks really good. It's something that might be up my alley as well, and I only just played the Mercenaries games and the Saboteur. So those are pretty cool games. I think they're very underrated games. Even the Saboteur was as well. But anyways, we'll move on into talking about Mercenaries 1. What's the most thing that you like about the first Mercenaries game?
I would say probably the fact that we had an open world war game. Because we had like open world crime games before, you know, the GTA games, but we had war games before that, but this was the first time they took the formula from like a GTA game and the formula from like a war game, and they basically made it so where you play as a mercenary, which is pretty much a genius idea, because it wouldn't have worked as any other soldier, because if you were just like a standard soldier, you'd have to follow orders, you know, go to specific places, but as a mercenary, you can generally do whatever you want and explore the entire map, and the level of the destruction, the weapons, the vehicles, I think it was and also the setting, North Korea, is what made it an extremely unique game.
Yeah, I definitely gotta say Mercenaries is very, very unique. We don't get very much open world military games anyways too, so that's one of the reasons to why the Mercenaries franchise is a huge standout for me. I think it's probably the first open world military game I've ever played as well too. Because like you said and stuff too, that most war games are just linear games, like for example like Call of Duty and all the stuff like that. But yeah, North Korea is such a unique setting as well too. I've never played Mercenaries 1, so all you guys out there, that's For your information, I just seen playthroughs on it, and I think it's a really cool game. I just never got a chance to play Mercenaries 1, so that's why we're interviewing the professional about Mercenaries 1. So let's talk about the story of Mercenaries 1. What do you know about the story in Mercenaries 1?
Well, I didn't really know that much at first. I was, when I started playing it, I was about 10 years old. And it was, I remember my friend, he actually got the game first, and he let me borrow it, and I really liked it. But I actually really didn't know much about North Korea when I was 10 years old. And I started learning a lot more about the country because of the game. But then, and I didn't even really fully understand exactly what kind of country North Korea was. I didn't know what communism was when I was like 10 years old. The only thing I knew about North Korea is I knew that North Korea was a brutal dictatorship, and I started, learning that. And I started reading more up about the country when I was a kid, so that's interested me more in the history and just the way the country is.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, in Mercenaries 1 is also set in a fictional Second Korean War. That's exactly what it is too, right?
Yeah, but in the Mercenaries universe, the history of North Korea is a tiny bit different. The history of North Korea in the Mercenaries series is the exact same as modern North Korea until the mid-90s. And what basically changed was that when Kim Il-sung, who was the founder of North Korea, he's also Kim Jong-un's grandfather, when he died, North Korea did not become a transition to Kim Jong-il, who was his son. So what happened was North Korea transitioned into kind of like a socialist kind of like republic. It's kind of similar to China's system, where China is pretty much still very much an authoritarian state. It's kind of a dictatorship, but it's not like I would say as psycho as North Korea. And so what ended up happening is President Kim became the first leader of North Korea after Kim Il-sung. He has no relations to the Kim family, and he ruled North Korea for about 15 years, because Mercenaries came out in 2005, but actually takes place in 2009. So he ruled North Korea for about 15 years. And what happened was he was tired of the conflict that was going on between North and South Korea, and he generally had goodwill, and he actually wanted to unite North and South Korea, but not like conquer South Korea. He just wanted to end the conflicts and all the disputes, and he became a very popular leader in the South Korea in the Mercenaries series. But what happened is he invited a South Korean delegation to North Korea, and South Korea basically said to disarm North Korea's nuclear weapons program, end their slave labor, and to shut down their military, and then they could begin negotiations. And he agreed to all of those. He shut down the nuclear program, he shut down the slave labor camps, and he also started cutting back on the military. But his son, General Song, who's the main antagonist of Mercenaries POD, he was a top general in North Korean army. He really hated what his father did, and so what he did was he overthrew his father in a coup, and he killed all these South Korean diplomats at in North Korea, and South Korea put like extreme sanctions on North Korea. The UN did. North Korea became even more isolated, and supposedly he had killed his father, but he really kidnapped his father and was torturing him for the nuclear launch codes. And so North Korea then became even more isolationist than it is today. He brought back the slave labor camps. He started building the nuclear weapons up. And the story goes that in the booklet, because in the manual of the game, it says all of these events, but it says in the manual that the Australian Royal Navy found a North Korean ship that was sinking. So like it was in distress. It was like a freighter ship in Southeast Asia, and the North Koreans actually abandoned the ship in panic. Like they got off the ship and in their small little boats, and they tried to scuttle the ship. And the Australian Special Forces became suspicious. They checked the ship, and the ship had nuclear weapons on it, and the nuclear weapons were being sold to terrorists in Southeast Asia. It was being sold to terrorists in Indonesia, I believe. And at that point, the United Nations gets involved, and they basically said that General Song is selling nuclear weapons to terrorists in other nations, and so they decided to invade North Korea, and that's pretty much where the story starts. And the Mercenary, I think, only shows up like 2 or 3 weeks into the war, so the war's already been going on for close to a month when the Mercenary shows up. And that's basically the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm. And also, let's talk about the factions also, too, in the Mercenaries franchise. One thing I do love about Mercenaries is that it has faction variety, diversity in factions and stuff. Even though I've never played Mercenaries 1, I do know that there are 4 other factions that you can ally up with. There is the Allied Nations, which is a parody off of the United Nations.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also the Russian Mafia, which I think is probably my personal favorite. They look pretty cool. I think they're a militarized looking mafia. I like their balaclavas, the armor that they wear, all that kind of stuff. It looks pretty cool. Definitely unique for a mafia for sure. And I do like its logo. It has a really unique logo. It's a hammer and sickle kind of, but like with a skull in the middle. So it's like,
yeah, and it's black
Soviet.
Also versus Soviet red.
Yeah, that's what I find really cool too. And there's also China and South Korea as well. So I know that China, I think they want to annex North Korea. Is it right?
Yes. So China and North Korea have an alliance that if North Korea gets attacked, China is supposed to defend them. But the thing about that is the Chinese actually decide to disregard the alliance. They don't want to fight the AN. And so what they just try to do is they actually try to annex North Korea. So they invade North Korea from the north, and they try to basically turn it into another province. That's
pretty interesting. What else do you know about the lore in Mercenaries 1?
Well, I know that the thing about Mercenaries 1 is I think it's pretty accurate to what a lot of modern conflicts are like. Because in a lot of modern conflicts, you have a lot of these various factions, and the thing is that people look at this on like a, they look at this on strictly, good versus bad, and there are certain sides that are, much worse and more evil than other sides, but in reality is there are different factions who ultimately they have their own agenda, and they're also doing bad things. They might be more good than the other faction, but they're doing some questionable things. This is how a lot of modern conflicts are. Specifically, like for example, the Chinese, as we discussed, they are just doing into North Korea for selfish reasons. They want to annex the country. They just want to take it over. There's nothing, they don't want to help the people or anything like that. They just want to conquer it. South Korea, on the other hand, they want to annex North Korea also. While they might be more justified in annexing it because they speak the same language and they have the same culture, the South Korean side, if you notice about them, they're actually controlled by a CIA agent, Agent Buford. So basically, the South Koreans are being told by the American government what to do in Mercenaries POD. So they're almost basically like puppets at the same time too. And then you have the Russian Mafia, which the Russian Mafia are the worst, and they basically just want North Korea to be as destabilized as possible, and they want chaos just so that nobody can stop them in the confusion, and they can just keep stealing weapons and just selling weapons on the black market. And the AN, while the AN are generally the best faction in the game, they're the least evil. The problem with the AN is that the AN is not really making an attempt to help any of the civilians, and on top of that, they're also lying about using mercenaries, because if you listen to the radio in Mercenaries POD, GSRN news vans, they constantly say that AN forces have captured this, AN forces deny that any mercenaries are being used in the conflict, and the mercenary is going and causing a lot of chaos, and a lot of innocent people are dying because of this. So the North Koreans are worse than all of the other factions. They're worse than the Chinese, the South Koreans, the AN, but the thing is, though, is that just because the North Koreans are the main villains, and they're, more evil, does not necessarily make the Chinese or the Russian Mafia or the South Koreans the good guys also. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. That's what I do find very interesting about the game. I know that you really like Mercenaries 1 too, because it's also very dark and stuff too. And what I do know is that a lot of the places in Mercenaries 1 are accurate to real life North Korea.
Yes, so you have Pyongyang in the game, which Pyongyang is the capital of North Korea. You have Nampo, which is a port city. You have the Arch of Triumph, the Arch of Reunification. You have the Sino-Korean Friendship Bridge, which is a bridge that you see in the northern part of the map. I haven't unlocked that yet in my playthrough, but that's basically the border between China and North Korea. And on the Chinese side, I believe the name of the city is called Sinichu, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. The nuclear reactor location, I'm pretty sure that's a real nuclear reactor location, North Korea, too, the name of it. And I don't remember all the cities and the towns in the northern province, but I'm sure that they are also real places. And Haiju is also a real place. That's a southern city in the beginning of the game. And also, Kaesong. Kaesong is a real place. It's a city that North Korea actually conquered in the Korean War, and they actually kept it after the Korean War, so it was originally South Korea. The DMZ, the border, is a real place where you have, like, those small little buildings where North and South Korean soldiers would, like, face off at each other. That's a real location. They also have Propaganda Village, which Propaganda Village is probably the creepiest location in the game. It's a real place, and Propaganda Village is a village across the border from South Korea. You can actually see it into North Korea from the South Korean side, and all the buildings on that side are really nice looking, and the whole purpose of that is the buildings are fake. It's a trick, basically, South Koreans into coming to North Korea. That's the whole purpose of Propaganda Village.
And they also, I think one of the most iconic places in Mercenaries 1 is the Ryongyong hotel. I don't know how to pronounce that.
The hotel. It's an abandoned hotel. When you go after the Ace of Clubs, you bring down. It's called Song Tower in the game. It's a lot smaller in the game than what it is in real life, but it was a giant hotel North Korea started building in the 1980s. They used Soviet aid originally to build it, and they wanted to impress the world. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, the aid stopped coming in, and North Korea had a famine in the 1990s that they tried to cover up. A lot of people starved. A lot of people died. And they halted the project for several years. And it wasn't until the early 2000s when, Kim Jong-il was the leader at that point, and he started building it a little bit back up more. Kim Jong-un finished the outer layer of the building, so the outer layer is finished, but the inside is still, a lot of the rooms are still unfinished, as we know, and the hotel is still abandoned. You cannot use it, but they use it for propaganda purposes, like they light up stuff on the building during military parades and such.
So yeah, it's pretty much like basically a monument for, North Korea pretty much as well. And what I do know is that the place is completely vacant and there's no electricity in there, right?
As far as I know, the building does have electricity because it is, there are those big screens that are powered on it, and there's a light-up display of the North Korean flag at the tip of the building, so it does have some power, but I don't think the inside of the building has power.
Okay. But anyways, that's it for Mercenaries 1. Let's move on to talking about Mercenaries 2.
Viva Venezuela!
Everybody pays.
So let's start with me, guys. Mercenaries 2, I started playing the game, I think I was like 11 or 12 at the time, and it was on the PlayStation 2 version. My former stepdad at the time was going to, I think it was a Blockbuster at the time, I forget. I think Blockbuster was still around at that point, and he picked up a game, because he knows I loved war games and all that kind of stuff, and so he rented the game, and I was still playing on PS2, and it was pretty fun. I was always playing games such as Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and I always wanted to play another open world game similar to Grand Theft Auto, and so my former stepfather picked up that game for me, and I played Mercenaries 2 on the PlayStation 2, and it was a blast. It was really fun. I was young at the time, so I know that Mercenaries 2, the PlayStation 2 version, is not as good as the original, but, when you're young, you're not gonna, look into a lot of that stuff. You're just gonna play games for fun, of course, too. So, do you know much about the PlayStation 2 version?
No, I actually don't. I didn't play the PS2 version. I only played the PS3 version. Oh no, the Xbox 360 version is the version I played. But I know that the PS2 version runs on the exact same engine as the first game. That I do know, but I don't know much about it.
So basically, I've looked at some stuff comparing the animations of how you run in Mercenaries 2, the PlayStation 2 version, and the original. Obviously, there's only one type of version for Mercenaries 1. You can definitely tell they run on the same engine, they look similar, and they... but in terms of detail, you can definitely tell that Mercenaries 1 looks better, because I think Mercenaries 2 on PlayStation 2 was definitely rushed, and it's actually not made by Pandemic. It does say made by Pandemic, but also it's not made by Pandemic. I think it's made by something called PI Studios or something like that, and I think that version potentially was in development late into development and stuff, and I think they wanted to get another version of Mercenaries out so they can make for more sales. That's my guess. It was also 2008 at the time too. 2008 there were still PlayStation 2 games being made at that point, because in 2008 World at War had come out that year too, and they also had a PlayStation 2 version of World at War. And during 2008, when you compare PlayStation 2 versions to PlayStation 3 versions, or original Xbox versions to Xbox 360, they are the same game but slightly different. That's what they basically are. So there are a bit of different things. in Mercenaries 2 on the PlayStation 2 version. They start similarly. They have the same story and all, but they have different mission structures, basically. So that's one of the differences between the PlayStation 3 version of Mercenaries 2 and Mercenaries 2 on the PlayStation 3 version. So yeah, that's what's that was kind of interesting.
The destruction is way better in the PS3 version, and on top of that is that just the graphics in the engine are just vastly different. It's just follows generally the same story, but gameplay is just so much better on the PS3 version.
Yeah, definitely, because I finally did eventually play the PlayStation 3 version a few years later, when I had my own independent PlayStation 3, because there was a time where I was mostly just sharing with my stepfather, my former stepfather at the time. My former stepfather played a lot of SOCOM on there as well too, and one of the reasons to why he got Mercenaries was because he said that it kind of looked a little bit like as if you were to mix Grand Theft Auto and SOCOM's gameplay together, and then you get Mercenaries, because the way you run, the shooting mechanics really was very similar to SOCOM, and so it was pretty cool. That's what I definitely got to say I liked about the Mercenaries games. But anyways, let's talk about the factions. There are more factions actually this time around in Mercenaries 2. So of course, you know, you have your main enemy, of course, that you can never be friends with. You got the Venezuelan army. And you also got Universal Petroleum. You ally with them, I think, first. You got the PLAV, People's Liberation Army of Venezuela. And then you also got the Pirates to the north of the map, which are, I think they're Jamaican, I believe, right?
I think Jamaican, or they might be from the Bahamas. I'm pretty sure that they are from the Caribbean.
They're up in the north part where mostly the water is at, so it makes sense that they'd be like the Pirates, like, faction, of course, because, you know, pirates mostly on the water. And then we also got, of course, two returning factions with you know, the Chinese army, and then you also got the Allied Nations. Is there another one I think I'm missing, or I think that's it?
I don't think there's any other faction yet. No, I don't think there is.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it for the factions and stuff, except for, I think, the PMC, of course, which is our own faction. It would have been really cool if we could recruit our own very own faction, the PMC, like have our own like PMC
well, I think
soldiers.
they planned that in the later Mercenaries games that never came out.
So kind of like something like Saints Row, that would have been really cool. So I actually like to slightly compare the Mercenaries games with Saints Row as well, because of the over the top craziness and destruction and stuff too, and that's what I would say as well too. So that's one thing I really liked about Mercenaries as well. But anyways, let's talk about the story of Mercenaries 2. So what I do know about Mercenaries 2 is that it's all about the oil. The oil is the main part of the story, right, for Venezuela?
Yeah, and it's like I said, that one thing the Mercenaries games do capture really well is they capture how a lot of these factions have ulterior motives. Like, they might say, oh, we're here to end Solano's dictatorship, but in reality, they're just there for the oil. You know, the Chinese and the AN are just there primarily for the oil. You know, the Chinese, I would say, a little bit more honest about it, but the AN guy, remember, when he's talking to Matthias, the guy in the wheelchair, he says, "You'll help us secure the oil. I mean, peace." That's what he says afterwards. So it's clear that they're there for the oil, because Venezuela is actually the most oil-rich country in the world. It has more oil than the entire Middle East combined. A lot of people don't know that. The pirates obviously just want to destabilize the country. The Universal Petroleum are just there to rob Venezuela of their oil, and the PLAV are pretty much just a puppet faction of China. That's pretty much what they are. So they're funded by China. They're a puppet faction of China. Yeah.
So isn't the PLAV? There are guerrillas. That's what they are. Yeah, they're guerrilla warfighters. And I actually like the location where the PLAV are. They're in the Amazons, the Amazonas, or whatever they call them, right? Yes. Like the Amazon rainforest. So we actually get a lush part of the map in this game. There's actually a lot of like diversity actually in Mercenaries 2. There's like there's so many cities. I know Maracaibo, I think, is one of the first cities that we go to. That's a real city, I believe, too. Caracas is the capital.
Yes.
And I don't really know too much about Venezuela, but if you know anything about Venezuela, is it accurate to how Venezuela is?
I don't know Venezuelan geography as well as I know North Korea. The cities I know much more, but Venezuela, Caracas, I know is the largest and capital city. It does have a huge portion of the Amazon jungle that runs through it. But Venezuela is a socialist dictatorship today. It is it's not as bad as North Korea. Like, it's not like in Venezuela, if you talk crap about the government, generally you're gonna get arrested, probably fined, but they're not gonna kill you. But like in North Korea, if you say anything bad about the government, you're either gonna get executed or you're gonna get sent to a slave labor camp. So Venezuela, it is a dictatorship, but it's just not on the scale that North Korea is.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, Caracas, actually, I think it has the tallest towers in the game, I believe, as well, too, in Mercenaries 2. And if you actually go to Caracas, I know you can't go to Caracas early on in the story, because I think you have to unlock that later on. And when you go to Caracas, it's so war-torn, it kind of resembles more of the dark and grittiness of Mercenaries 1, if you noticed that. I don't know if you ever noticed that in Caracas.
Yeah, it's foggy. It's really foggy.
It's really foggy. It's really it's actually pretty creepy and stuff, and I like it. I think there's also a town called Merida as well. It's also like a shanty. It's a really poor town as well too. I think that's where the guerrillas are mostly at. That's also pretty war torn as well. And speaking of, let's talk the diversity of how this map is. Each set of the part of the map has its own uniqueness and color. It kind of reminds me of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, how each part of the map has their very own color palette and stuff, comparing San Fierro, Los Santos, Las Venturas, all that kind of stuff. And that's one thing I really liked about Mercenaries 2. So that's one thing a lot of people got to really give credit for with the Mercenaries games in particular. But with Mercenaries 2, they have diversity in terms of the color palette of, if you're a Maracaibo, I think Maracaibo is more of a it has more of that sunny skies to it. And of course you got the lush jungles. They have more of a greener feel to them. There's also some towns and stuff that resemble, I think, the favelas actually of Brazil, because when I see the favelas, I think of games such as Modern Warfare 2, and I think of Max Payne 3. So that's also unique in architecture as well.
I wouldn't say that they really resemble the favelas. It's more that Venezuela has its own favelas. It actually has those hilly, cities with just a lot of shacks and broken down and run down buildings. There is massive poverty in Venezuela like that. And the poverty in Venezuela is actually much worse than the poverty in Brazil. If you think about the favelas in Brazil, the favelas in Venezuela are even worse.
Yeah, but yeah, one of the reasons to why I compared it to that was because in terms of South America, I know Brazil the most because it's the most games I've seen in terms of because I played a lot of Max Payne 3. I played, of course, Modern Warfare 2, and of course I've seen Fast and Furious 5, which also took place in Brazil, I believe, right?
Yes.
And so that's how I know that, and that's why it looked really familiar to me. So, but yeah, that was pretty cool. Let's also talk about the co-op. There was also co-op also too in Mercenaries 2.
Yes.
It was actually pretty cool. I used to actually play it back in the day before EA shut down the servers for the game. And
you can still play it on PC though, but there's a mod you have to install to play it. It's their own customer service. But the most annoying thing about the co-op, and I think you'll remember this, is that if you got too far from people, it would just close your game. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
It was you had to be a specific distance close to your partner.
Yeah, because also too, when EA shut down their servers for that game, if you're logged into PlayStation Network, when you're playing Mercenaries 2, it would say connecting to EA servers, and if it fully connects to EA servers and stuff, because meanwhile they're non-existent for that game, your PlayStation 3 will completely freeze. That was actually one of the things that I hated with the game. So every time when I played Mercenaries 2, right after the servers were shut down, if you don't want your PlayStation 3 to freeze, log out of PlayStation Network and make sure that you're not signed into PlayStation Network at the main menu, and then once you log into the game, you sign back into PlayStation Network. That's how you dodge the whole the game is signing into EA servers and stuff. And so yeah, that's one of the of course scummiest things, of course, with EA as well too. And we'll get into a lot of the scummy stuff that EA has done, of course, too, with Pandemic Studios, and we'll also talk about EA with what they've done also with other studios as well too, in other video game franchises. Alright, so at the end of Mercenaries 2, there was a foreshadowing of India being in Mercenaries 3, and this Mercenaries 3 game was obviously cancelled. But there is also there was a gameplay that was shown on YouTube many years ago. I think it was like 2010 or something, showing Mercenaries 3 gameplay, and it was in Cuba. And I heard that this Mercenaries was also supposed to be more than just one country that it was going to be set in. Do you know much about that?
Yeah, I remember the gameplay. The Russian Mafia was supposed to come back. Joseph was supposed to come back from Mercenaries 1. And there was, in Cuba was one of the locations, but the main antagonist in Mercenaries 3, I don't know if you know this, they weren't actually going to be a dictatorship. It was the first time the antagonists weren't a hostile government, but they were actually a hostile PMC. So it was like a rival PMC. They were the main antagonist, and in that gameplay that you saw, they were using those drones in Cuba to go after you. Do you remember that gameplay?
Yes.
They were ground drones, so they were like these little robot tanks that they sent. Like, they were tiny, but they had like machine guns on them, and those were going to be the antagonists in Mercenaries 3, the main ones. So there was going to be like hostile governments you fight, obviously, but the main antagonists were going to be that other PMC.
Yeah, those combat robots, I think that's what they were called and stuff. I do remember when you pick up this journalist, of course, and you drive down the street, and then you get out of the car, and then you start shooting at the combat robot, and then the demo just abruptly ends. You remember that?
Yeah. There was a small cutscene, but it was unfinished, where you see them go into a church. That was it. But that was pretty much it.
Yeah, it was an animatic. That's what it was. That's what it was called. I wonder. I think that gameplay thing was leaked. Actually, I think it wasn't meant to be put out and stuff. I believe it was leaked, and that's why it abruptly ended right there too. Because there's no other gameplay that go past fighting that combat robot, and all you can hear, I think, is the dev talking, and he's just abruptly cut off. It's not like he's saying, "Yeah, thanks for watching this little demo of Mercenaries 3." It just cuts off. I believe the footage was not completed or anything like that, and maybe it was corrupted, the rest of the footage or whatever. And I think that was the only thing why we only see that on the internet. You think that's probably what it could have been as well?
It might have been an angry employee that had leaked it, that wanted to show the fans at least what the game looked like after, EA shut them down. And I remember that Star Wars Battlefront 3 got leaked too. They were working on that originally, years ago, and I think the full game actually got leaked recently. It's unfinished, but you can watch it on YouTube. It's literally just a few weeks ago. The whole thing got posted. I don't know how fans managed to get their hands on that, but that was their original plans for Star Wars Battlefront 3. So they were developing a few games. They were developing Star Wars Battlefront 3 and Mercenaries 3. Those were the two projects that we know they were making at the time before they got cancelled.
Yeah, which is so unfortunate and stuff, because when I first saw that, the gameplay, when it leaked all the way back then when I was young, I was like, I can't wait for this game. And this was just after the time when they were shut down, and I didn't even know that they were shut down actually at the time. I thought that Mercenaries 3 was still on the way when I saw that, and then after I read up on something about Mercenaries 3, where's this Mercenaries 3 game, I found out, I think over a year prior, before 2010, I was like, oh, they shut down around that time in 2009? I was like, what? I was pretty sad about that, because I was like, I think I enjoy Mercenaries more than Grand Theft Auto at times. That's what I was saying when I was playing the Mercenaries games, like just Mercenaries 2 PS2 and Mercenaries 2
Mercenaries,
PS3.
you have to remember, Mercenaries was basically the closest thing that kids could get to Grand Theft Auto back in the day, because of the fact that both Mercenaries games were rated T. Mercenaries 2 was rated T also, right? I'm pretty sure it was.
Yes.
So both the games were rated T, and you had, big map, you can explore chaos, you can steal vehicles, blow things up, blow buildings up, kill people, drive around military vehicles. So that was like a way for kids to get a kind of like GTA style game without actually getting GTA, because if you were under 17, you had to show ID and you couldn't buy it. So that was like a way for kids to get around that, was by playing Mercenaries, which was rated T.
Yeah. And I think that Mercenaries is a little bit more educational in terms of military acknowledgement as well too. I think that's what's also good about it too.
Well, the games weren't I would say realistic. They were very unrealistic, but all of the weapons in the games were real weapons. The vehicles were all real vehicles. And I think it was more realistic in how it depicted like these conflicts that because if there was a war in Venezuela, God forbid, it would be very similar to what you have in Mercenaries 2, where you would have different factions that would basically be trying to take advantage of the oil crisis that's in Venezuela. That's pretty much what a conflict that would be. I'm not defending the Venezuelan government, they suck, they're a dictatorship. But if there was like a war in there would be a lot of factions that would say, we're coming in here primarily to get rid of the dictatorship. Meanwhile, they have other ulterior motives for being in the country, because there's plenty of other dictatorships around the world, but they don't really interfere as much in them because there's no resources for them in those countries. But I think that's the thing, is that even though in the Mercenaries games you play as a mercenary, is that a mercenary is really, when you think about it, is the worst step that you can have in like warfare as like a soldier, because it's like a soldier that's working primarily for money and for anybody that pays them the most amount of money. And so that is it's really the Mercenary series are really, even though they're war games, they're clearly anti-war, and it's clearly a criticism of the the private military system, and also the military industrial complex. It's a massive criticism on that. Yeah, they're primarily anti-war games, because if you look at Mercenaries POD, when that game came out in 2005, that was the height of the Iraq War. And and you have to remember, the plot of the game in Mercenaries POD is the reason the Allies go into North Korea is to look for weapons of mass destruction, which is exactly the same thing that happened in Iraq. They went in, there was a brutal dictator in North Korea, they went in to look for weapons of mass destruction. There was a brutal dictator in Iraq, they went into Iraq looking for weapons of mass destruction. And the Deck of 52 that you actually have in the game is based on the Iraqi Deck of 52, where it's bounties on all of the top people of the Iraqi regime. I think Saddam Hussein also was the Ace of Spades, with General Song is the Ace of Spades in the in Mercenaries POD. So it was a criticism of the game, of the wars. The pandemic wasn't defending North Korea. They're not defending like the Iraqi government, but they were just saying these are pointless, dumb wars that should not have happened. But they happened. People were lied to. They went in, and in the end of Mercenaries POD, the faction that really tends to win at the very end of the game is the Russian Mafia. They're the ones who tend to win. North Korea is completely destabilized. China's army is completely destroyed by the mercenaries. South Korean's army is completely destroyed. General Song is arrested, and the AN pull out. North Korea ends in the credits. It's factional violence. There's all these different factions that are fighting each other. Warlords control various parts of the country. The country's destabilized. Its energy system is completely destroyed. All of its infrastructure is destroyed. It's just in absolute poverty, massive casualties, massive amounts of destruction, and it's created a power vacuum for the Russian Mafia to flourish, which North Korea ends up becoming a more dangerous place afterwards than before it was under General Song. And when you think about Iraq at the same time, Iraq was kind of similar, where you had a brutal dictator, but then after the invasion and the dictator was taken out, it created a giant power vacuum where you had all these different factions fighting each other, a lot of terrorist groups, criminal groups, fighting for control. Iran was getting involved in Iraq and sponsoring these Iranian militias, destabilizing the country. So the country was in ruin, its infrastructure was destroyed, and you had terrorists and militias and all these bad people just roaming around, and it just created a power vacuum. So I think the moral here is that sometimes when you intervene in another country, even if the intervention might have good intentions, sometimes it completely backfires, and it creates more chaos and just more destruction. And I think the true solution would be for people in their own country, the people in the own nation have to be the ones primarily for change. It cannot be by a foreign power, because when it's a foreign power that's going to bring in change in the country, the foreign power is going to want something. They're going to want some kind of something in return. And that country's, do you know what I mean? It's always the people in the country should be the ones. Like, the people in North Korea should be the ones that should change, primarily get rid of Kim. The people in, like, Iraq should be the ones who primarily get rid of, like, Saddam Hussein. Because when you have, like, foreign people, foreign powers, and foreign governments, and, you know, coming into another country, and even if they have good intentions trying to get rid of the dictator, in the end, they're going to want something. And then that new government becomes beholden, basically, to that foreign entity, that foreign power. They're going to have to do whatever they tell them to do. Yeah,
so General Song, I do know, he's inspired, I think, by Saddam Hussein. Yeah, they're both the Ace of Spades.
He's based on Saddam, yes.
The Ace of Spades, basically. He's the basically the snakehead of the deck of 52, as you could say, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But anyways, since that we were also talking about Mercenaries 3, and since that Mercenaries 3 was going to actually have not just fighting a dictatorship, we were going to be fighting rival PMCs, that could have been the future of the Mercenaries franchise, actually, because this also leads into the cancelled online Mercenaries game called Mercs Inc. It was actually going to be developed by Danger Close. Are you familiar with Danger Close?
No,
they made Medal of Honor. They made Medal of Honor 2010 and Medal of Honor Warfighter as well. And they were going to be completely in charge of making a full-on online Mercenaries game to where there's a bunch of PvP and PvE in it as well. And only a leaked little trailer popped out for that game, Mercs Inc. And I think it could have had so much potential, because it could have been like the Mercenaries for GTA Online, actually, like the GTA Online of the Mercenaries franchise, because it looked like it had big lobbies of players. I don't know if you ever seen the Mercs Inc. trailer. Have you ever seen it before?
I've seen it once. It was a very short trailer. It was like the guy in the little Jeep shooting the machine gun, right? That's what it was?
Mm-hmm. It showed all that, and
I was running on the Mercenaries 2 engine, right?
It looked like it was running on Mercs 2's engine, definitely. Yes. I could definitely tell it was running. It was an alpha. I could tell it was not complete at all the way it looked, but the concept was there. It looked really interesting, and I think it could have... If something like this existed and it actually worked and a lot of people were having a blast with it, I think something like that, and if EA saw the potential in all of it, they probably would have made more iterations of Mercs Inc. probably, or something like that. And since that games such as Grand Theft Auto Online is about running businesses and all that kind of stuff, I think running your own PMCs and having PvP battles against other rival players' PMCs, that could have been something really fun. What do you think about that?
I would have definitely been for it. I would have been excited. I wouldn't have wanted Mercenaries to just go only online. I still want a single player experience and a story. But I would have been, all for like a spin-off like multiplayer only game. I think that would have been cool as well. It was Pandemic Studios was my favorite studio when I was a kid growing up, and that studio just suffered so much, and they got ruined by EA. Like, EA just screwed them over so badly.
I kind of really wish that Pandemic Studios went on to go make like a indie studio and work their way up or something, and make things that were inspired by Mercenaries or the Saboteur, for example, and all that kind of stuff. But we'll get to all that very soon with all that stuff. But anyways, let's talk about Mercenaries, what they could have done with the Frostbite engine, and EA just threw out the window as well too with that. I know they do really good with Battlefield. We've seen how cool Battlefield looked. Battlefield Bad Company, I think it's 2008. Battlefield Bad Company 1 came out. They showed off how cool the Frostbite engine was. I think that was the debut of the Frostbite engine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then 2010 was when Battlefield Bad Company Bad Company 2 came out, and they were just upgrading the engine more and more and more. I think one of my favorites of the Frostbite engine has to be Battlefield 3 as well. I like the full-scale destruction of buildings with Battlefield 3 and 4. Those are pretty cool, and just the Frostbite engine got better and better over time as well too, not in terms of just destruction, but graphically and also sound design. And I think Battlefield 3 and 4 I think have the darkest stories in the Battlefield franchise. And so if Mercenaries was to exist still, like around the time when Battlefield 3 or 4 came out, they could have made for such a really good dark Mercenaries game. I think that's what they could have done. And also, I do know that the soundtracks of the Battlefield games are pretty good. The Mercenaries games had some really good soundtracks as well too. So I think if they had more Mercenaries games, they could have spawned some even more really good soundtracks for those games. And I really love soundtracks in video games too. They are a part of the art of the video game.
A good soundtrack gets you excited to play the missions too.
Yeah.
Like Mercenaries had a very heroic soundtrack. The first one I think had a much better soundtrack than the second one, but it had all the trumpets that were playing. It was like a very heroic theme that was playing.
Yeah, and I think if an online Mercenaries game was to happen and stuff too, just think about how the free roam sessions would look. The free roam sessions would probably look like a mix between things like Grand Theft Auto Online and Battlefield at the same time. I believe that's probably what the free roam modes would look like. You think so? If they had something like that, it'd be like a mix between GTA Online and Battlefield at the same time. If we had an online Battlefield game.
But they would have to have some kind of objectives that you get money from. They would have some kind of income in the game, something to generate money in the game.
Probably a lot of arms dealing, probably stuff
missions
too.
Probably too. They might have bounties in the game, and you might compete over who captures the bounty, stuff like that. Generally,
that too, kind of like Red Dead Online and stuff too. What I do when I after recently watching your playthrough of capturing the deck of 52s, it's been really making me think of Red Dead Online capturing bounties, and it was making me think of it would have been so cool to see Mercenaries have an online to where you just go after HVTs, high value targets. That's basically the military term for a bounty, right? HVT.
Yeah, high value target.
Imagine working together in your mercenary squads all together all the time and just picking up HVTs, making money non-stop, all that kind of stuff. That probably definitely would have been something you probably would have streamed almost every week too if something like that existed, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I definitely would have been excited for that. And we need more competition against GTA Online. Because GTA Online cannot be the only open world, crime game out there where you make money. There has to be some competition. There has to be something else. I don't want it just to be GTA.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, if Mercenaries ever does come back in the future, I really hope that they use a lot of these opportunities and stuff too, and really hope this documentary gets out there somewhere too, because I do see a lot of other people even making. Since it actually is the 20th anniversary for Mercenaries, there are other people actually making documentaries actually on Mercenaries recently. So potentially that could be a really cool sign or something like that. But yeah, let's now move on to part 7 with Mercenaries Franchise and the controversies and stuff with this franchise. This might be another reason to why it might be a little bit difficult to maybe make another Mercenaries game, especially based in a real life country. We see a lot of these other video games out there that are making fictional countries but based on real life countries. I'll bring up an example. Modern Warfare 2019's Urzikstan as well. Remember that, right? Urzikstan?
Yeah. Well, Urzikstan was supposed to be based on Syria, I believe.
So Mercenaries, I do know the first game was banned, I think, in South Korea for a couple of years, right? You know about that?
That I didn't know about. I do know about the Venezuela ban. That I do know. And I know that Venezuela got really pissed about Mercenaries 2.
But yeah, that's what I think that this franchise needs and stuff. If because you know how society is today and stuff, they hate it when, you know, something is based on their culture or something. They think it's a parody off of their culture and making fun of their culture and stuff like that. There's sensitive people are just so sensitive to today and stuff. So I think that's one of the reasons to why I believe Modern Warfare had to, you know, make their very own, you know, fictionalized country of Urzikstan.
I don't really have an issue with them using real-life countries. I actually like it better when it's real-life countries, because these are, like, you know, real locations, and you might be interested to, like, find out more about the countries. But, like, for example, like, you know, Venezuela and North Korea, these are two countries that are clear dictatorships. You know, North Korea is obviously worse, but they're both dictatorships. Like, Venezuela, for example, when Mercenaries 2 came out, the Venezuelan government actually made a statement about the game, and they said that this game was being used as, like, training and, like, propaganda purposes to, like, for, like, an American invasion of Venezuela. But if they actually bothered to play the game, they would have known that the game actually criticizes America just as much as it criticizes Venezuela. So, like, that game criticizes both countries. It criticizes America, like, America's, like, interventionism, and, like, in the game, like, when America's in Venezuela, it basically, remember how the agent that you work for basically says that they're there primarily for oil. So that game is not pro-US by any means. Like, Venezuela think it's, like, pro-American propaganda. No, and it has, like, a greedy Texas, you know, oil company that's, like, stealing from Venezuela at the same time too. And at the same time as they're criticizing the PLAV, which the PLAV is supposed to be Venezuela's original government, the socialist government, but in the game they're just puppets of China. That's what they are. Which Venezuela today Venezuela is pretty much a puppet of China and Russia. Like, both Russia and China have, like, massive stakes in Venezuela. So that game was pretty much criticizing all sides, but the Venezuelan government is like, oh no, you can't criticize us. That's how they were saying. It's like, we didn't do anything bad, only the Americans deserve to be criticized. But if they bothered to play the game, like I said, they would know that the US was being criticized just as much as the Venezuelan government was in that game.
Yeah, I very much agree, actually, with all that. I agree and stuff too, especially with I do prefer actually real life countries as well too. It is cool when they base it off of real life countries, but I think one of just the reasons to why, though, now we just, you know, go along with these, you know, fake countries and stuff that are based off of real countries. You know how it is with all the AAA companies out there, right?
Yeah.
They tend to be more upon, you know, with the censorship and all that kind of stuff nowadays. And so I think it's just a sign of the times, unfortunately. You know, I really wish things could go back to the way they used to be more. And so this brings me on to talking about maybe a little bit what Just Cause does. Just Cause goes by, you know, country names that are not real. And so if a Mercenaries game is to ever come back, I think to avoid some sort of controversy with real life countries, they probably would go with what Just Cause does. Like, for example, with you got Medici, you got Panau, and then you also got Solis as well too in Just Cause 4.
So also the Central American country in the first game, but I forget its name. But,
yeah, I forget its name as well too.
Yeah, but I will tell you though is that a lot of problem is political correctness. I would say that has a very negative impact on, you know, choosing these locations, choosing real life cities, choosing real life country locations, and it's always somebody's apparently going to get offended. But I don't know how anybody I don't know how anybody from Venezuela could, like, get offended that like Mercenaries 2 is you know, takes place in Venezuela. Venezuela is like a, you know, socialist dictatorship, like I said, and it's criticizing the regime. And the same thing is, you know, we aren't able to talk to people from North Korea, but I'm assuming if, you know, North Korean refugees had, like, seen the game Mercenaries POD, I'm assuming they wouldn't be offended by the game, because, you know, they fled from the Kim regime. So I don't get personally why people would be offended by, like, real life locations. The last time that a game had a huge controversy was, have you ever played Ghost Recon Wildlands?
Yes.
Well, Ghost Recon Wildlands, as you know, is Bolivia, which is real life country, and in the game Bolivia basically becomes a narco state, and that was the last time that that a real life country was really used in a in a large open world game. As far as I'm thinking of it, I can't think of the last time a real life country was used in a big open world game, but that caused such a huge controversy. Bolivia got really angry about that. I don't know if Ubisoft apologized for it, but I didn't really have any problem with them using Bolivia as a country. Like, I'm not Bolivian, so I can't speak on how Bolivian people feel, but I didn't really have an issue with it. And the thing is, a drug cartel would, if they could, they would destabilize a country like Bolivia and try to conquer it and use it to basically smuggle out drugs. I mean, that's what Panama used to be. Panama used to be a narco state, so it's not completely unrealistic to have like a drug cartel topple a country, topple a government. It can happen.
Yeah, and let's also talk about a bit of Ghost Recon Wildlands and stuff too. This actually gets compared with Mercenaries at times too, because, like I said, not very many open world military games come out these days. And whenever I go check the comment sections of some of the videos surrounding the Mercenaries franchise and stuff, people say, I miss this game so much, or all that kind of stuff too. And most of the games that get brought up in terms of today that mostly have come out closer to today is actually, people will talk about, the only thing I can think of playing something similar to this nowadays is Ghost Recon Wildlands or the Just Cause games. Those are actually that get brought up the most, because obviously Mercenaries and Just Cause, what they have in common is they are about destabilizing dictatorships and causing a lot of destruction and chaos, destabilizing these corrupt governments and stuff like that. And you got with Ghost Recon Wildlands, it is set in a real country. It is set, of course, Bolivia is South American, so people compare that with Mercenaries 2, South American country. And I know that Ghost Recon is not entirely obviously similar, because Ghost Recon focuses more on stealth, whereas Mercenaries doesn't have stealth all the time too. But it would have been really cool though if the Mercenaries franchise went further ahead and actually implemented stealth elements way more. Do you think they probably would have done something like that, implemented a lot more stealth missions?
Yes, but I think it would have to require a new engine, because Mercenaries 2 and 1 were not equipped for stealth missions at all. There wasn't even a way to stealth kill an enemy. Like, if you come up behind an enemy, there was no way to stealth kill. The only way to stealth kill was you'd have to use a suppressed weapon, but even so, that would be hard to do.
And that's where the Frostbite engine could have came in, right? We got Battlefield with the stealth missions, right? Imagine all the stealth that they could have added in there. It probably would have been like, there are missions that start mainly about stealth, and then later on you blast your way out and stuff. You know how those stealth missions start out really quiet and stuff, and then later on you guys get compromised, and then you make your getaway and stuff, and it turns all bombastic.
Yeah,
like that. That's how I could see stuff like that. I think of the mission Cliffhanger from Modern Warfare 2 2009, and I also think of All Gillied Up with One Shot, One Kill from COD 4. Those are the top stealth missions that come to mind. That you start off really quiet, later on it becomes really bombastic and action packed more. So that I think that's how I think that Mercenaries could have done a lot of their like stealth and bombastic missions if the Mercenaries franchise was to continue. But now let's talk about EA's history of disappointment with canceling a lot of good franchises, and of course, the closure of Pandemic Studios. So I think it was 2009, I think I did say that earlier on in the video. It was 2009 that they closed down Pandemic. And the thing is with EA games, I don't buy any game really that is made by EA today at all. The only thing I probably will ever play from EA is just the Battlefield games pretty much nowadays. And what they've kind of done to Battlefield is kind of I don't really like the Battlefield games as much today as I used to, but if there is a good Battlefield game that looks fun, realistic, all that kind of stuff like that, and it stands out from what Call of Duty is trying to do with their Fortnite like stuff, then sure, I'll get a new Battlefield and stuff. But It was disappointing of what they've done, of course, by canceling a campaign for Battlefield 2042. I don't think they even planned one. I don't know if they did or not. What they did to Battlefield 5, also too, with how they made World War II in that game, I don't like what they've done there as well either. And also what they've done to Medal of Honor. Medal of Honor is one of my most favorite World War II franchises, and I also do enjoy the 2 and only modern day Medal of Honor games as well. So they canceled that. And I don't know much about Dead Space, but I heard that Dead Space 2 remake was supposed to happen, but EA also canceled that too. And EA, I think, is well known for something like this nowadays too. What they say is single player is dead and multiplayer is like the way to go now, pretty much. You've heard of that controversy. Yeah, and you look at
Battlefield 2042. Battlefield 2042 had no single player campaign. It was instead just purely multiplayer, and it failed. It was a disaster. Like, Battlefield 2042 did not get the reception that they were hoping for.
Is that what one of the reasons to why you did not want to play Battlefield 2042 as well? Is
yes,
because
there's no single player campaign, but also I never got into it. I just didn't have fun with it like I did with some of the other games. I just don't know. It didn't click for me. It just wasn't enjoyable. Like Battlefield 1 I could get into, and that was like, World War 1, and I had fun with that, but Battlefield 2042 it never clicked. It just wasn't fun, and also it was so overpowered that like every single class in the game could have a rocket launcher, and that was just so annoying. You couldn't use any vehicle. Like when you get into a helicopter, you get like 20 people locking onto you at once. It was frustrating, and so it's like, and I know eventually it changed some of that stuff, but it was not enough to bring me back to the game. I didn't really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's understandable as well. But yeah, I never really played much of Battlefield 2042. I only got to play a little bit of it because it was free of PS Plus, pretty much, a bit. That's pretty much it. And let me see. Let's also talk about the Saboteur as well, too. The Saboteur was another franchise that they decided to cancel as well. I don't understand.
Pandemic's final game, too. That was what it was, and it was a great game.
Mm-hmm. And I don't get EA's logic and stuff. You close down a studio, but why not give this franchise to another developer? EA is massive. They have I don't know
the way that EA looks at things is they see one game series did worse than the previous game series, and so because of that, it's not worth investing more into that. That's basically how they look at it. I'm pretty sure that the primary reason that Pandemic was shut down was because Mercenaries 2 did not sell as well as the first game. I think that was the primary cause, and so they didn't sell as well as the first game, and I think they said, Mercenary people don't like Mercenaries anymore, when that's not true. Is if they developed a different Mercenaries game, made it even better, it would have sold better than the first game. But it was just stuff like that, and I don't know how you can close down the studio of Destroy All Humans, Star Wars Battlefront, and Mercenaries, the Saboteur, and think that was a good decision to close that studio down. Like, literally, that studio made so many good games, and it's like pretty much every single game was a good one.
Yeah, and it's also not very fair that EA could have done this. They could have at least, brought out Mercenaries 3, and if they didn't see anything good with that or whatever, then shut down the studio or something, because there's usually 3 strikes and you're out, or sometimes third time is a charm sometimes. You never know, right? Mercenaries 3 could have been a really good game. It could have popularized it even further. Do you believe so?
Yeah.
If it happened?
I think it could have, developed into a really big franchise. Which you have to remember that GTA did not become the franchise that it is until GTA 3. So you had GTA 1 and 2, but then GTA 3 is what really took off of it. And Vice City got really popular, and San Andreas was really, made Rockstar rich. So it was, it took 3 games for GTA to really pick up steam. So it's like, a lot of times games are not going to pick up steam right away, but EA doesn't seem to understand that, and they closed down Pandemic, and it was one of the worst decisions I think they've ever made.
Definitely. Because, I think we definitely could have seen something similar to Grand Theft Auto with Mercenaries and stuff, because the word Mercenaries, that is actually a pretty popular word and stuff. I think mercenary is another word for a soldier of fortune, basically, right? Just a person that goes to war. They don't care about the conflict. They don't really care about what this war is about, really. They just want money and stuff, and
sometimes
to become rich.
Mercenaries do care a bit about the conflict and what's going on, but their primary motivation for being there is money.
Mercenary is kind of a war criminal, right?
Well, mercenaries are not always. The thing is, the majority of mercenaries today, I would say, are bad people. You have Blackwater, which is Blackwater. It's just the largest American mercenary group, and they, Merryweather in GTA is based on them. They're a parody of them. They have committed war crimes, for example, in Iraq. And the mercenaries, I think, are inspired by them in the game, Mercenaries POD. And then you also have in the Wagner group in Russia, which is the two largest groups, Wagner in Russia and Blackwater in America, and they have committed, war crimes in Ukraine and in Syria. So you have both of these mercenary groups that are just, really bad. But the thing is, though, is that the only form of good mercenaries that you have are the mercenaries that are hired for defensive purposes primarily. When you have mercenaries that are hired for offensive purposes, like in conflicts, that's where you have the problem. Like, for example, a lot of ships that sail in the Indian Ocean hire mercenaries to protect their ships from pirates, because there's a lot of pirate activity in the Indian Ocean. And so, especially off the coast of Africa, like Somalia, there's a lot of pirate activity, and so these mercenaries, are wearing, plate carrier vests, they're carrying ARs, and so they're there to protect the ship, and if the mercenaries weren't there, the ship could have been taken over, and so those guys do good. But when you come to, like, Blackwater or Wagner, that fought in, like, Iraq, Syria, and Ukraine, those are bad guys. They're not good.
Yeah, so basically, a mercenary is either a good person or a bad person and stuff. It depends on the morals, basically, of the mercenary organization, right? That's what you would say, right?
It kind of depends on the morals. It also depends on what conflict they're fighting in, what side, and their primary motivations. But most mercenaries used in warfare are not good people. Most mercenaries used in warfare are generally bad people. And you also have to remember that mercenaries are not always soldiers. Sometimes mercenaries are pilots, fighter pilots, and sometimes they are also pilots of helicopters as well. So they will pilot vehicles as well. So mercenaries are not always just foot soldiers.
But yeah, speaking of course, since I was talking about how mercenary, it's basically a big word and stuff, a popular word and stuff, just like how the word in Grand Theft Auto is the name of a crime. And that's why I'm saying that Mercenaries could have taken off as a pretty popular franchise, because when you look up the word Grand Theft Auto, for example, and if you're just looking up the word Grand Theft Auto for its crime, the game will pop up right away. It's just the game that will mostly pop up. And if Mercenaries took off as a pretty big franchise, and if people just wanted to look up the word mercenaries as in just the actual soldier of a mercenary, it could have popped up as the game, probably. Yeah. That's what I'm meaning.
That would help them too, yeah.
But since that Mercenaries is a, forgotten game by a lot of people, if you just type in Mercenaries today, the most thing that actually pops up today now is just the real-life mercenary, or Resident Evil's game mode known as Mercenaries as well. That's actually what pops up a lot. Every time I try to look up something related to Mercenaries, the actual franchise, it pops up about Resident Evil instead. Like, I don't know if you heard of the Mercenaries game mode in the Resident Evil games, but you might have probably seen that pop up before too, right?
Yeah, I think Resident Evil 5 is where it first popped up, right?
I believe so. But yeah, but I think you know what I mean and stuff, how, like, how it could have taken off as such a huge franchise and stuff, like, since the word mercenary is popular, just like the word Grand Theft Auto, I think it's just a major missed opportunity, and all that stuff. But yeah, let's talk about the Saboteur and stuff. The Saboteur, it is, of course, another unique setting. Open world World War II. You mostly think of, games that are set in World War II, linear, just like any other military shooter. And, of course, like I said, another, major missed opportunity with that as well. It just seems like they just miss out on opportunities on these games that are set during war settings that EA decide to throw away, that are set in open worlds.
Well, I have never seen an open world World War II game, and I think that's what they were so unique with the Saboteur. And another thing with the Saboteur is the Saboteur takes place in the first and second year of Nazi occupation of France. So the game starts out in 1940, and it ends somewhere around 1941. And you know that because they mention in the game that there's one mission where they mention that the Nazis had invaded the Soviet Union, and so that you know that the game's been taking place over a 1-year period because Nazis conquered France in May 1940 and they invaded the Soviet Union in June of 1941 with Operation Barbarossa. So a lot of games when take place in France during World War II, it takes place in 1944 when the Americans are landing with the Normandy landings and they're pushing back the Nazis, kicking them out of France. But this is very early on into the occupation when the Nazis are at their strongest in France, and you do not have any help. And it's just you primarily in the resistance, and you're trying to fight back and trying to fight and liberate France.
With the Saboteur, and goes for like most of like Pandemic and stuff too. Pandemic Studios, they tend to mix a lot of like unique genres together, and even thinking of other different video games. Like obviously when you think of games like, you know, Mercenaries, you think of like, you know, the formula of Grand Theft Auto. When you look at the Saboteur actually has that formula of looking somewhat similar to Assassin's Creed as well because of the parkour system.
Yes.
And you think of it like, oh, this is almost like as if like Assassin's Creed was in World War II at the same time, but it also has that Grand Theft Auto feeling formula to it because you could steal cars. You can even kill the civilians if you wanted to, but the Nazis will come after you like the cops and stuff.
Well, if you kill a lot of civilians in Saboteur, the Resistance is going to lock its stores for you. I'm pretty sure that's what happens, is the Resistance gets really pissed at you if you do kill a lot of civilians.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you can kind of be somewhat of a bad guy in the Saboteur, so that's what, you know, that's why I say it's so mixed genre and stuff. You're cramming together a lot of these genres together that I very much enjoy, because I like... War games primarily are one of my favorites. I really enjoy, you know, open world crime, and so that's pushing together, you know, things that are pretty cool. And obviously I like historical time periods like World War II because that's how I got into history, because of World War II and growing up with all them World War II shooters growing up. And so that's why I say, you know, games like the Saboteur, games like Mercenaries, I enjoy them so much. And it's unfortunate that a lot of the games that I really enjoy that cram a lot of these like genres together, they all get unfortunately canceled for some weird reason. That's what tends to happen.
I wish that somebody else would pick up the franchise. But how did THQ even get access to Destroy All Humans? Like, how did they even get that from EA? I
actually don't know how they did it, but I think they need to pick up more of the former you know, games that are made by Pandemic, definitely. Even if Mercenaries, for example, if it was picked up by THQ, whatever developer is developing Destroy All Humans now, like, I get it, we probably will not see it run on Frostbite. You know, that's one loss, I guess, there, because, you know, EA, you know, owns Frostbite and stuff, but, you know, I think they'll probably find out something that'll be good. Like, don't they run it on a newer engine for the remakes of Destroy All Humans? They probably do, right?
Brand new engine.
And that engine's pretty good, right? It's smooth.
I could see them doing Mercenaries on it, but yeah, I would have to see. I'm pretty sure EA still owns the rights to Mercenaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do, because I think we brought this up earlier. I don't remember if we did, but I talked about how in 2021 they renewed the rights to Mercenaries and they expired again in 2022. I've not seen that, but apparently over the years, some of the other years before, they renewed the rights and then they just let it expire again. I don't understand what's the meaning of renewing their rights with the franchise. If you renew your rights and stuff, does that mean that you have plans for it?
Not necessarily. It just means that you're holding on to the IP. I think that's just generally what it means. EA would probably be really pissed if somebody else made Mercenaries. Like, they're not planning on doing it, but they'd be really pissed if somebody else did it.
Yeah, THQ will probably have to pay like a hefty price or something to pick it up off of them. Like, EA is just letting it sit in limbo. Like, that's what they're doing. Like any other, like, publisher out there that actually likes Mercenaries and is not a scummy publisher. They deserve to have the rights of Mercenaries. If they know what the franchise is all about, and if they're not entirely, they don't buy into this political correctness or anything like that, they don't support political correctness, I think that would be the best studio and publisher to pick it up and stuff. But unfortunately, a lot of AAA gaming these days, that's why it's hard to really have hope or anything like that. The type of political correctness climate we're in now, the sign of the times, it's unfortunately looking very slim to none, right?
I don't think Mercenaries is going to get picked up, and the political correctness stuff is just, it's going too far, especially in a lot of war games. If you see, like, what they did with Battlefield 5, for example. Battlefield 5, when they had, like, women soldiers in, like, the American and British Army, and I don't have a problem with female characters being in the game, but if you're going to do, like, a historical, World War II game, there was no women soldiers in the American or British Army during World War II. Like, sure, there was, like, they were technically enlisted as, like, nurses and stuff like that, but they didn't seem any frontline, combat. And if you wanted to add the female characters in the game, they could have added, the Soviet Army or, like, resistance characters, but what they did with, like, Battlefield 5, and the developer, when people complained about it, the developer doubled down and accused them of being sexist. And I think, you have political correctness like that that's just, destroying games.
Yep, and now this comes to our final words for Pandemic Studios and stuff. So, with some of the Pandemic Studios developers out there, what words do you have for these guys and stuff from
the developers?
Like your trial? Yeah, from your childhood and all that kind of stuff. Like, what would you say to them now?
I would say to them that you've made my childhood very happy, and I always just loved playing your games, playing your open world games, and I did think that you guys at the time were even better developers than Rockstar was, with just the amount of games, crazy open world games that you were putting out, and your final game, the Saboteur, was amazing, and it's unfortunate that you weren't able to keep developing.
And my final words, of course, to Pandemic as well, pretty much a lot of the same thing as what Pat said too. At times, I actually enjoyed playing Mercenaries more than Grand Theft Auto. Like, I still loved Grand Theft Auto, all that kind of stuff. But I think if it wasn't for games like Grand Theft Auto, I think your guys' game wouldn't exist. And round of applause, of course, for making this like competition and all that kind of stuff, and cramming together unique genres together, like war games, like war game like genre into something like almost like an open world crime game. And I particularly call this genre open world war crime and stuff, because you are kind of somewhat committing war crimes in Mercenaries. You can kind of also commit war crimes slightly in the Saboteur if you want to. You're in a sandbox open world. I know you're not really meant to do stuff like that, but younger self of me and stuff, I always enjoyed, committing chaos in video games. And so that's what I enjoyed about open world crime games and all that kind of stuff. And this open world war crime of a game, I would say too, like games like Mercenaries, Just Cause, for example, stuff like that. It is really cool of how you guys did kind of make it look a little bit like Assassin's Creed at the same time though too, with the parkour and all that. And so yeah, you guys will go down in history and stuff as probably as one of the most unique developers out there, and it's very unfortunate how EA treated you guys. And I really, really hope that you guys are still thinking of this franchise and thinking of all the good times that you guys have had developing Mercenaries, the Saboteur, Destroy All Humans, etc. I haven't played Destroy All Humans, but I think I should definitely check it out. I might probably do a playthrough of it on my channel at some point. And I really hope this documentary gets out there to some of the people who have worked on this game, some of the Mercenaries fans, all that kind of stuff. I really hope that you share this around, all of you fine fans out there who are fans of these forgotten franchises that didn't also deserve to be canceled so early on or prematurely. So yeah, I think that will be the end of this documentary. If you guys really enjoyed, please consider dropping a like on this documentary. If you also really enjoyed, please consider sharing. And thank you all for watching.
And thank you for having me also.
Oh, you're welcome, Pat.
And that's the end of the documentary, everyone. I really hope all you Mercenaries fans out there really enjoyed this documentary, as me and The Professional are very big Mercenaries fans, and we really hope that we earned your like on this documentary. If you are a Mercenaries fan and you know other Mercenaries fans out there, please consider dropping a like on this documentary, and also consider subscribing to the channel and ding that bell icon really hard so I can always stay within fast reach of your fingertips when new uploads arrive. ZombfectedGaming 349 over and out.